Chapter 63. The State and its Morality. One of the key ideas of the modern age is the concept of the primacy of the state. Many came to see this conclusion as Enlightenment thinking developed its logical implications. In Hegel, quote, "The state as the embodiment of morality," end quote, came into focus and soon commanded the intellectuals. The idea of progress was very popular about the same time, a secularized view of providence. It implied a world at the least backward and imperfect, if not immoral. How then was salvation possible? The Church as the saving institution was rather discredited, and the state readily assumed the mantle of the moral force in history. It came to this role easily. The classical world had gained great authority with the Renaissance. The ruins of Greece and especially Rome were especially eloquent to many of the greatness of classical culture. Curiously, at the same time, some refused to be impressed by the medieval Christian cathedrals. Classical culture was idealized. It was seen as a model of balance, proportion, and stability. As a result, the state replaced the Church as the saving institution, as in one sphere after another, the state's authority began to predominate and to govern. As a result, the state progressively became the answer to the problems of men in society. The state-licensed psychologists and psychiatrists dealt with problems once the province of priests and pastors, and in the 1980s, there were some who called for the state-imposed licensing of all clergymen who counselled parishioners. The state as the embodiment of morality meant that various departments and agencies of state were created to resolve the problems of men and societies. The confidence that status answers are the solution led to a common attitude that any opposition to status controls meant evil and perversity on the part of such persons. Robespierre had spoken of the good, the pure people, but what he meant was the state, that is, the revolutionary state. With time, the Marxists furthered this identification of the state and the people, meaning thereby the pure people and the revolutionary state. Rousseau's doctrine of the general will had prepared the way for this. Was the Church ever the embodiment of morality? At times, it definitely tried to be, and still does, but the Church is always under the judgment of God the Lord, and hence not free to define itself at will. But Hegel's state is the development of a natural kind of immanent deity, its own absolute and so beyond appeal. The state as God walking on earth is thus very dangerous. The totalitarian and imperial Roman state disintegrated despite the attempt to redeem it by accepting Christianity. The result was what Polly and Bernazel termed, quote, "the death of the state," end quote. From the modern Enlightenment perspective, such a condition was darkness indeed, and as a result, the term, quote, "dark ages," end quote, was coined to describe an era unblessed by statism. Meanwhile, the idea of the natural goodness of the state became increasingly popular. When, in the middle 1930s, Social Security became an aspect of the state's function, there were some who called attention to the inherent economic weakness of the Act and to the fact that the state could alter the Act and its provisions at will. Indeed, it soon became evident that Social Security was not a guaranteed insurance policy, but rather a status grant. When objections were raised against the Act and attention called to its weaknesses, the common reply was that, quote, "the government," end quote, as apparently the moral authority, would never permit that to happen. What is now developing is a growing, radical distrust of the state. Instead of being the embodiment or incarnation of morality, more and more people see it as the embodiment of immorality. This is to overlook man's original sin. At any rate, man must now seek morality from a source other than the state. The state has demonstrated that it is no more moral than man. Man's problem is that he sees himself as a victim, not as a sinner, and, as a result, he is morally compromised.